Welcome to Dynamic Democracy, the show about current events and politics. I'm the creator and commentator, Brad Waddell. I created this channel because I can't sit by and just watch what's happening in our political system anymore. There is hypocrisy and corruption almost everywhere you look. And the first story I want to cover is hypocrisy, I think, at its best. So recently, Jen Psaki sat down for an interview with the former Attorney General Eric Holder. He was the Attorney General during the Obama administration. And we are going to go through it, and I'm going to pause and react as I agree and disagree with what they're saying. So here we go.
Do you think, looking at this, Judge Chutkan reinstated the gag order after she put a pause on it? It's still under appeal. Are you confident, or do you feel comfortable with her legal justification for reinstating it?
Yeah, I certainly think there's a basis for her concern. I think there's a basis for the order that she has, in fact, put in place. My expectation would be that the appellate court will, in fact, uphold that which she has tried to restrain the former president from doing. It's a pretty limited order. It does not say that you can't say anything. It says you can only say you can't say negative things about a relatively small universe of people. You can even comment on the case.
They begin their discussion by going over the broad strokes of Donald Trump's federal case in Washington, D.C. over the events of January 6th. They then segue into the recent events surrounding the reinstatement of the limited gag order imposed by federal judge Tanya Chutkan overseeing that case. Eric Holder, the former Attorney General during the Obama administration, very astutely points out how limited it is. And I 100% agree with him. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone else in the criminal justice system that's being treated so gently in comparison. And in fact, there is a very contemporaneous example of exactly that. And for that, we're going to turn to a different story for a minute. A man named Vitaly Gosjankowski was hauled before a judge on October 30th for messages that he was sending to the FBI officer that testified against him in his trial. Mr. Gosjankowski was convicted on 6 counts back in March of 2023. While out on bond pre-sentencing, he sent intimidating messages targeting the FBI, sent photos of anything associated with the FBI, like the DC field office, and he also made intimidating social media posts about the officers, name-calling, harassing, threatening, and even doing his best to effectively dox the officers online. Gosjankowski's lawyer, however, claimed that he was just, quote, letting off steam because he felt that his First Amendment rights had been violated when he was originally arrested. The judge did not buy it and revoked Mr. Gosjankowski's pre-sentencing bond and was taken into custody immediately. The judge said very clearly that no, he was not being revoked because the judge disagreed with his First Amendment views, but because he believed Mr. Gosjankowski was attempting to incite violence. This is where we get back to the original story with Eric Holder.
But I think, as you said in lead-in, I think he's likely to go beyond that which even she says in that limited order. And we're going to have some ultimate questions that I think are going to have to be determined. Would a judge actually do that which would happen to a normal person and put somebody in jail for violating an order, not to a gag order? I suspect that's not likely to happen with this defendant, but any other defendant would probably be facing...
You don't think that she would put him in jail, or that they would decide to put him in jail ultimately?
I just don't think so. I mean, I think there are a number of things you put monetary fines on him, as the judge did in New York, perhaps restrict his ability to use Truth Social. A number of things. I try to be as creative as possible if I were the judge. But
And this is where Mr. Goss-Jankowski's story is relevant, because it highlights the difference where Trump is being treated with those kid gloves, with a very, very gentle hand. And Mr. Holder even admits that he would be shocked that the judge would jail him because of the possible political implications, which I agree with him on that. I find it unlikely that Trump would be jailed because of that exact reason. It would most likely further inflame the tensions that already exist.
But I'd be extremely reluctant to take a person who's a former president, the leading candidate of one of our major parties, and actually put him in jail.
Because you'd be worried about the political consequences or the reaction in the country?
Yeah, I mean, this is already a pretty divided nation, and to do something like that, to take somebody off the campaign trail, to put him in jail, I just would be very reluctant, really reluctant to do that.
No, it's...
He is right when he says that we're more divided than ever. Probably not since the Civil War. We are divided along party lines, and those wounds right now are incredibly deep. But there are a handful of things that almost all of us agree on. Paid family leave polls above 80% in the United States. That's all parties, likely voters, current voters, whatever. We feel the same way about corruption and this hypocrisy and these double standards that we're seeing. On one hand, I get the MAGA Republicans' anger at the system because it has failed us for decades. And unfortunately, they've chosen to use violence to act out their frustration. We need better representatives. We need new laws, or to reinstate old laws that prevent some of this corruption, the moneyed interests, the super PACs, corporate monies, especially when a company can come in and essentially give unlimited funds to a candidate. Say, what if they gave a candidate $10 million from effectively one person? Would that, as that politician, wouldn't they feel more apt or almost required in a way to do whatever that one donor wants, even if they raised another $10 million that was all small dollar donations by the rest of us? One person donates the majority of their campaign. They bought that person. They own them. It shouldn't be that way. It didn't used to be that way. And we actually do need to go back on this item. We have to get the corruption out. The only way to do it is to stop electing and re-electing people who are taking corporate money. If they're not doing what we want, what we need, they should not be in office. Look at the speaker race that just happened. 3 weeks. It was I can't even say a clown show, because that would be disrespectful to clowns. It was just nonsense.
We also learned today of an Alabama man, I mentioned this as well, who was indicted for threatening Fulton County District Attorney and a sheriff regarding Trump's Georgia election case. I'm wondering, I mean, you have watched hate speech, you've watched the impact of Trump's rhetoric. What is the connection? Do you see a connection there between the allowance of these type of threats, what Trump is doing out there publicly, and these type of threats against people like Fani Willis?
Yeah, I think these comments by the former president have to be viewed as attacks in two ways. One, on the system itself, and that has to be dealt with. But it also creates an environment in which the kinds of things you've just described, where threats are made against people involved in the case, are taken seriously by malcontents, nutcases, lone wolves, who might act upon the very things that he says. And so the concern that I have is not only for the system, but for the participants who are actually going to be attacked by the former president. And that threat is real. I mean, with all the guns that we have out there, in the environment that we now have, I'm sure that there's adequate security for all of the people who are involved in these cases. But the fact is that security is actually needed. And that is a sad thing to say involving a legal matter, involving a former president. It means that you've got to have protection for the people who are simply trying to uphold the law and do the jobs that they were elected to do.
It's quite a time. I mean, I think we talk a lot about how immoral, how dangerous all of these threats are that Donald Trump is making. Talk us through why this is such a problem in attacking potential witnesses in a case. I mean, if you were a prosecutor, if you were a judge, beyond obviously the violence, which is very important, what else are you worried about?
Sure. You're worried about whether or not a witness is going to be intimidated and be reluctant to share incriminating information against the former president out of fear that one of his followers is going to do something physical to that witness. You know, in mob cases, you know, one of which I tried when I was a public corruption prosecutor, we relocated people, we put people in the witness protection program. We did a whole variety of things to allay the fears that people have when they feel threatened. And that is not fundamentally different from, I think, some of the concerns that witnesses potentially could have in this case, or these cases.
The example of Mr. Jankowski is both timely and prescient because it highlights the difference how Donald Trump is treated in court, where he also makes inflammatory, threatening, and various other inciting statements, much like Mr. Jankowski, yet his pre-sentencing bond was revoked immediately. Yet Donald Trump gets 1,001 chances because he's running for political office. Former Attorney General Holder then begins discussing the new Colorado case also surrounding Donald Trump and his potential removal from the state of Colorado's ballot in the upcoming 2024 election. The 14th Amendment case essentially states that Donald Trump is ineligible to run for public office because he engaged and or supported the insurrection on January 6th. That being one of the clauses within the 14th Amendment that makes you ineligible to run for office, let alone for president. Just like being too young or not being a citizen of the United States makes you ineligible to run as for president.
There's also a case today in Colorado, I mentioned this, where it's questioning whether turning the 14th Amendment could be used essentially to kick Trump off the ballot. It's not the only state where there's a case like this. What do you make of that legal argument?
Yeah, I think there are some legal questions there as to whether or not, it applies to a president. This question of, we've looked at the word of and how it's used, the word the and how it is used there.
The former AG agonizes over his reading of these statutes of words like of and the and where are they placed, using an extremely critical attorney's eye. But I don't believe that's the right way to read these type of statutes. They should be read in plain English and should be acted upon as the majority of people would understand the statute. Hence the term plain reading.
And then I also worry about, taking him away from the ability to run for president, taking him off the ballot without the people of the United States, taking a choice away from the people of the United States. And in the same way that I would be reluctant, if I were a judge, to put him in jail, I'm also reluctant to use this provision of the Constitution to take him out of the election. I think we should, let's have this election, let's have a fair election, let's have it well run, and let the people decide. I'm actually pretty confident that. I can actually guarantee that he will not win the popular vote. That'll guarantee. The question is whether or not he will win in the Electoral College, and that I think is going to be a lot closer. And I'm concerned about what the result would be there. But at the end of the day, I think that is the place to decide whether or not he should be the next president of the United States.
I completely disagree with Eric Holder on this point, because he says that it should simply be left up to the voters to decide whether he is elected or not. It's my opinion that the justice system exists for a reason to uphold the laws that are on the books. That includes the 14th Amendment. Nobody should be voting for a candidate that's ineligible. And that's the point of that case in Colorado right now. They are literally deciding whether he is eligible based on the wording of the 14th Amendment, that he engaged in insurrection. This case in Colorado is incredibly important. It's the very first case of its kind against a former president. We do not have any legal precedent one way or another. This needs to be adjudicated, and if they find that he is still eligible, then he is eligible. And that's the way it needs to be, because we're supposed to be a country of laws. And if we just selectively choose which laws we'll honor based on our party affiliation, what does that say about us? Are we really that great? Are we, how are we supposed to be this supposed example to the rest of the world if we allow this type of behavior from the people at the top levels of our own government?
As we all follow this, because there's different state cases, and I just was trying to understand what the impact could be. If a judge in Colorado, say, rules he should be kicked off, but a judge in Minnesota rules he shouldn't be, then that's conflicting, right? And that could go to the Supreme Court?
Yeah, that would ultimately go to the Supreme Court. I mean, the Supreme Court is the ultimate arbiter of what the Constitution says. And if you had conflicting rulings by judges in different states, I think that ultimately would have to be decided by the United States Supreme Court.
Even if the Colorado case ends in a ruling against Donald Trump, I do agree with Holder that he would absolutely appeal. I think he would actually appeal even beyond the state's highest courts all the way up to the federal Supreme Court. And I believe that because Donald Trump knows that getting reelected as president is his best guarantee, which is a sliver of a chance to save himself from prison time based on the outcomes of these multiple federal criminal cases he's facing. The only way he might be able to sneak out from under that, or delay the process, or delay justice in some other manner, is to become president and wield those levers of power in his own self-interest. So I think it's really rich that A.G. Holder is so worried about how Trump might abuse the legal system, but at the same time doesn't think they should get involved. There is a potential confluence of events coming up in the near future. With this Colorado case just starting, it will take months to even get to the highest levels of their state courts on various appeals. And I believe it's likely to go to the U.S. Supreme Court, as I already stated. But at the same time, Trump's criminal trial for January 6th starts in March of 2024. And it is possible that the Supreme Court could refuse to hear the case and allow states to simply make their own decisions. They could all just join in on a unanimous order for the rule of law. They could refuse to hear the case, or they could stay their decision pending the results of the January 6th trial. The wording in the 14th Amendment says engaged in, not convicted, but convicted of does mean engaged in. So, after that trial, there would be an actual potential finding of guilt on behalf of Donald Trump, and therefore bolsters this argument for the 14th Amendment, making him ineligible. We'll have to wait and see. The Supreme Court, it's like a coin toss anymore. You really don't know what they're going to do. And that's scary for all of us.
I know you probably don't find yourself agreeing with Bill Barr often, I suspect, but we did just listen to kind of what he had to say, and I'm wondering what you make of his comments about Trump's pledges for retribution and the chaos that could cause. I mean, what scares you most about what he could do if he were in a position of naming a new attorney general, overseeing a Department of Justice?
Yeah, I think that Attorney General Barr actually has it right there, and this is one of the few instances where I would agree with him, though I would ask him, you knew this about this guy before you decided to be his Attorney General. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm obviously concerned about what he can do between now and the election, and were he to win the election, I'm really concerned about what he would do to the rule of law, to our system of justice, to the United States Department of Justice that is, near and dear to me. There is nothing that I would put beyond what Donald Trump would do in order to save himself, in order to ensure that his interests are protected and those who are his supporters are protected. And you would, in essence, I think the former Attorney General is also right. You would be getting not the second team, not the third team, you'd be getting the fourth team in a new Trump administration. And so as bad as things might have been, 4 years or so ago before, I suspect they would be even worse starting in 2025.
The man says he's concerned about what Donald Trump would do if he got reelected and what he would do to the legal system in our country. But the same Attorney General also says he has a reverence for the legal system, but doesn't think that the system is duty-bound to apply the laws that are on the books, including the 14th Amendment in all of its clauses. The rot is right here. You can see it in this double talk, cowardice nonsense that Holder is spewing, frankly. If a man who is at the top of the judiciary as the former attorney general is willing to say, no, let's not apply the law to this man, then what hope do we have? We cannot afford to have people like that. We need to be able to pivot when something is going wrong. We need to be able to react in real time with a changing media environment and a changing world and a changing political landscape. We cannot simply continue to hedge our bets and hope that the old traditions of politics are just going to continue working as they're supposed to, and that the machine's just going to keep chugging along. It doesn't work like that. I think it screams hypocrisy. And I think it screams hypocrisy because the people at the top of our federal government get treated differently than the rest of us do. And you can see that evidenced by Mr. Goss Jankowski's treatment and how he's handled in the court system, along with thousands of other Americans. Yet Donald Trump gets treated with kid gloves. We shouldn't touch him. We don't wanna upset it. What are we gonna do? What do you mean? Apply the rules that are on the books. They're there for a reason. If they've never been applied before, yes, they have to be adjudicated first. But not with this crazy agonizing over of and the. Did he help and support, aid, give comfort? Whatever the term is, frankly, a distinction without a difference, in my opinion. If he did something to aid and abet or assist in January 6th, I think he should be ineligible. And I think that the Supreme Court, if the appeal is taken all the way there, would actually agree with that, because ultimately the Supreme Court is also corrupt in so many ways. We've seen story after story after story in the last year about money and gifts that multiple justices have gotten, vacations, cars. It's insanity. They're literally being bought. They know the power that they hold as one of those 9 justices. They are absolutely 100% aware of that. But if Donald Trump gets into office, he's already said more than once that he would want to centralize all the levers of the federal government to the executive branch, meaning that 3 branches, co-equal branches, would effectively be centralized to a single person of one of those branches. Trump wouldn't need the legal system anymore. That means he wouldn't need a Supreme Court. So if the Supreme Court says that he can still go on the ballot, they're risking their own positions that they're getting, or have been at least, been getting an epic load of money and influence and power from those positions. They would be threatening themselves if they allow him to stay on the ballot. Washington, D.C. is not like the rest of America. Not when you're the top of the federal government. The president, vice president, members of Congress, the judiciary, they all live in this little bubble of their own making, that they have their own rules that apply to them and nobody else, and that our rules don't apply to them. And we all out here are left feeling like they aren't being held accountable when the rest of us are. That's the problem. That's the corruption. That's the hypocrisy that is not being dealt with at all. It, even a year into this constant stream of Supreme Court justice leaks, and we found out about this trip to Italy, or Justice Thomas getting a $250,000 RV as a gift. I would love to have a $250,000 motorhome just gifted to me for no reason. We need politicians and leaders and attorney generals that are actually willing to do the hard work that's required, even if it's politically inconvenient or politically damaging to their own brand, because they're not there, or they're not supposed to be there just to hold on to power. They're supposed to be there to be doing the work for us. That's why we elected them as our representatives. And if they're not actually working on substantive items, they gotta go. You've been in the spot too long then. We need fresher leadership. We need them, because The old Democratic norms, the old Republican norms of how the parties operated don't work anymore. I've spent most of my adult life watching people 2 and 3 times my age act like children. And it's embarrassing. It is literally embarrassing to watch. It's no surprise to me that the younger generations, 35 and under, are tired of the nonsense. And you can see that laid out in the most recent off-cycle elections. You can see that in polling about the war in Gaza right now and the Biden administration's handling of the current crisis and the war over there. You can see young people like myself are not okay with the system continuing to operate in opposition to what we actually want. We also need politicians who are actually working for the things that we all do agree on. If there's something that the country is evenly divided on, I can understand why they can't make a whole lot of progress. But if there's something that polls at 70, 75, 80 or more percent, like paid family leave, why are they not doing it? All of that being said, I do have hope for the United States. I think that we can make it better. I think that we can right the ship, we can turn it around, that we can actually get back to the business of helping the people who live in this country right now. We have plenty of issues to tackle, and Congress and the presidency are not listening to us. And if they don't want to listen to us, then it's time for us to vote them out and vote in someone who will listen to us. My name has been Brett Waddell. This is Dynamic Democracy, and I hope you will join me again. Thank you. If you'd like to learn more, please check the description below for some resources on the 14th Amendment, the Colorado case, the Supreme Court, Mr. Josh Gankowski's case, and polling about paid family leave in the United States, as well as a link to the original interview with Jen Psaki.